Okay, so now this is going to be the Europe Quizbowl walkthrough, part 2. I have previously gone through Western Europe, so-called because of its geographical positioning in the West, but also because of the division that we know occurs after World War II, in which Eastern Europe is dominated by Soviet influence and communism. Whereas, of course, the West is going to be more so with democratic ideals and various different influences of the United States, etc. Forgot one really quickly thing when it comes to Spain. Be familiar with Francisco Franco and the 1930s Spanish Civil War, kind of like a training for World War II or a run-up or a practice or something like that. So let's get right into it for Eastern Europe. I'm going to start with the south, move into the Balkan Peninsula, the powder keg of Europe, that of course is the site of the beginnings of World War I. You have in Sarajevo, now from the country of capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Black Hand, and that of course led it into just utter chaos of the World War I Great War. Nevertheless, so let's talk about former Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was ruled by a dictator named Tito, T-I-T-O, but it was then broken up in the 1990s with the fall of communism and just descended into a hideous war with various different accusations and, of course, atrocities of genocide and the like. Especially you have Slobodan Milosevic, Serbian, who leads a genocide in that horrible Yugoslavian war, the previous Yugoslavs. But nevertheless, now divided up into Slovenia, which I know very little about, with its capital of Ljubljana. I think Slovenia might be the home of Melania Trump, the wife of the former president. You have Croatia with its capital at Zagreb. And over here along this coast, it used to be known as Illyria and Dalmatia, where, of course, we get the Dalmatian breed of dog. But its city of Split particularly features in many, because of its fantastic architectural look, various different films, and the Game of Thrones was filmed quite a bit in Split. You also have Dubrovnik, that is here. Now, surrounding, or I should say Croatia is somewhat surrounding Bosnia and Herzegovina, like I said, with its capital of Sarajevo. I think Sarajevo was the host of the 1980 Winter Olympics. I could be wrong, but at any rate, you move over now into Serbia with its capital of Belgrade, which had been the capital of Yugoslavia. And much like you have Vienna on the Danube, Budapest, the capital of Hungary, which of course used to be two cities of Buda and Pest, but now one city, Budapest, also the Danube. Also then it does the Danube through Belgrade on its way eventually to the Black Sea that one sees over there. To the south of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Serbia, you have Montenegro with its capital of Podgorica. You have Kosovo with its capital of Pristina. And again, all of these were involved in that hideous ethnic cleansing war after the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s. You have North Macedonia. This is an older map from 2012, no longer just known as Macedonia, but North Macedonia, with its capital of Skopje. And here you can see that this is known as the Balkan Peninsula, which, of course, is so rife with all kinds of conflicts of ethnic groups, religion, etc. Hence why it was called the powder keg of Europe, which, of course, did lead to World War I. You have Albania, which, of course, has as its capital Tirana. And then, of course, Greece, which plays such a vital role in the classical ancient world. Its capital, Athens, that you can see here. For Greece, remember that you have the mainland with Attica that is here, and then Boeotia, which is here, and so forth and so on. And then the Peloponnese, which contains the cities of Sparta and Corinth, as well as Kalamata, which I'm assuming gives its name to the type of olive. So to the west of Greece, you have the Ionian Sea, an arm of the Mediterranean, and to the east, you have the Aegean Sea, so named after Theseus's father, Aegeus, who apparently threw himself into the sea upon the return of Theseus from Crete with the Minotaur. The Sea of Crete, immediately therein, above to the north of Crete. You have here the Cycladic Islands, or the Cyclades, that are here. Now, very briefly, to move through, you have the Dardanelles played a role in the Gallipoli campaign of World War I. It used to be known as the Hellespont, then into the Sea of Marmara, and then this is the Bosporus, which you can see this part of Turkey is actually a part of Europe, which is why Turkey is a part of NATO. And then it goes into the Black Sea, which is incredibly important. But first, let's deal with a couple of other countries as we move north before we talk about the Black Sea and its importance. You have Bulgaria with its capital of Sofia, that is right here. Its northern border being that of the Danube. We move into, of course, Romania, which features, along with the countries of Slovakia, Ukraine, the Carpathian Mountains that you can see here. And across the Carpathian Mountains, you have, obviously, Transylvania. Trans means across, and Sylvania is the word that means forest. So it's the forest across the Carpathian Mountains. Be aware of them. Nevertheless, the capital of Romania is Bucharest, not to be confused with Budapest. Different. I always thought that they sounded somewhat similar when I was younger. Now we start to get into some of the... Oh, and by the way, Romania's dictator, much like Yugoslavia's was Tito, Romania's is Ceausescu. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but important to know Ceausescu a long time. Also, Hungary in the 1950s had an absolute crushing movement. I think it was 56 by the USSR, the Soviet Union, as they were somewhat teetering away from communism, and quickly was that put down. But, oh well. So we move into Romania with Bucharest, then Moldova with its capital of Chisinau. And we'll get to Ukraine in just a moment, which I suspect, due to the fact that it is such in the news with the horrible, horrible Russian invasion that had begun in February of 2022, I want to say. Yes, I'm almost positive. February 2022 is now so much more in the news. But before we do that, let's talk about the Czech Republic. It used to be Czechoslovakia, with both Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Now it's just the Czech Republic. Look up, if you're responsible for Europe, the Prague Spring, a short moment where, of course, it seemed as if there was an opening up of society and perhaps democratic ideals. But you also have over here Slovakia with its capital of Bratislava, yet another capital city on the Danube River. So the Danube comes up quite a bit due to its flowing through so many of those capitals of Europe. We move into Poland with its two major rivers to be noted, the Oder and the Vistula. The Vistula River flows through Warsaw, that one can see here. And, of course, Krakow, also along the Vistula River as well. Up here, the important city of Gdansk. In the late 80s, you had a movement, a union called the Solidarity Movement, led by a fellow named Lech Walesa. He is incredibly important. Go look him up. And he, of course, helped to lead Poland into a non-communist state, being the first president post the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. And so Gdansk, the shipyards that are there, the Solidarity Movement, and of course, also other things to know for Poland when it comes to all aspects of Quizbowl. You have Chopin, who is a Polish/French composer, but so much of an influence with Poland from his works. But just so much to know. The partition of Poland, the various different horrible concentration camps. Most of them were located there. Of course, everybody's familiar with Auschwitz, but there's Treblinka, Dachau, Buchenwald, and just the list goes on and on and on. But oh well, we will move on due to the interest of time. So before we get to Ukraine, let's talk about these countries here. These are known as the Baltic states, and I am pretty sure that all of them now are in NATO just this past week. I'm making this in the middle of July 2023, where we had a NATO summit held, I think, in Lithuania, in Vilnius, its capital. So please know its various different capitals. Lithuania has Vilnius, Latvia has Riga, and of course Estonia has Tallinn. The Baltic states, all former part of the USSR, but of course no longer. You have a Russian exclave with Kaliningrad over here, somewhat important to know as well when it comes to Quizbowl. And then we have Belarus. For all intents and purposes, the last dictator of Europe is Lukashenko, who rules Belarus as a Vladimir Putin crony, and essentially puppet-like player, and of course from the capital of Minsk. So that is for Belarus. Also, too, that is where the leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, supposedly had fled, but now apparently, just in the past week, he is said to be in St. Petersburg, the second largest and greatest city of all of Russia. It is on Lake Ladoga that is here, and during communist Russia was, of course, not St. Petersburg, but was instead either Leningrad or Stalingrad. I'm embarrassed that I don't know that, but oh well. Lake Ladoga, Lake Onega. Please know both of those as well when it comes to Russia. And, of course, the capital of Russia, as we all know, is Moscow. Now, Ukraine. In February of 2022, Ukraine was invaded in the area over here with the east, the Donetsk region, and that's what you see. But in 2014, the Crimea was, of course, invaded and annexed by Russia. These people here are ethnic Russians. They speak Russia. However, in the time of the USSR, Ukraine was granted Crimea and granted it forever, but Putin had other ideas in his desires to perhaps try and reestablish the Russian USSR empire, as it were. And so now Crimea is a part of Russia due to annexation. But the hope of the Ukrainians is that the war will result in the, of course, return of Crimea to Ukrainian rule. Crimea is also the site of the Crimean War, mid-19th century, with the, of course, Charge of the Light Brigade, which was made famous in a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Also the Battle of Balaclava. You have at the tip of the peninsula Sevastopol sticking down into the Black Sea. Also the Crimean War is where you have the birth of modern-day nursing with the role of Florence Nightingale. The UK was, of course, fighting it. Off to the east of the Crimean Peninsula, you have the Sea of Azov that you have here. All along here somewhere is Sochi, Russia, where the, of course, Winter Olympics were held within the past 10, 15 years, something like that. Other cities that have been in the news quite a bit for Ukraine, besides the capital of Kyiv along the Napier River that you can see here, is Zaporizhia. That is the site of a huge nuclear plant. Mariupol has been in the news quite a bit. Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv, all along that, of course, area that since 2014 or so has been controlled by separatists backed by Russia, but now is in full-out war. The Wagner Group was involved quite a bit with this war until, obviously, it supposedly fell apart when the leader, Prigozhin, of the Wagner Group, that mercenary group that had been sponsored by Moscow, turned on Moscow and marched with a somewhat seeming mutiny, as it were. But you have the Volga River that I pointed out earlier, which is the longest river in all of Europe, followed by the Danube, that is the one over here in Western Europe. And then, of course, the southern border of Russia is that of the Caucasus Mountains that contains the highest point in all of Russia and Europe even, as it says here, which is that of Mount Elbrus. So you have Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus Mountains. And, of course, the former also Soviet states that are a part now of Asia, including Georgia, which was invaded by Russia as well in the area known as South Ossetia. But there it is. So at any rate, hopefully you were a little bit more familiar with the European continent if you're responsible for it. Please be aware that the division between the continent of Europe and the continent of Asia is seen as the Ural Mountains, which you can see right here. And so you have Russian Europe, which is where most of the Russians live, as in the European side, because over here you have moving into Siberia and Asia and the like. But as I said, I hope that it is somewhat of a starting point for you. But there's lots and lots that I have left out, so much that I've left out. But hopefully it will lead you to be more familiar. Remember, the first and foremost, know your capitals, and then you can move on from there. So hopefully you have a good time studying and it converts into points and victories for our team. Thanks so much.